53. The Rat Wife. Shishan was a native of Kelmi and a trader by occupation. He frequently slept at a place called Nangai. One day he was delayed on the road by rain, and when he arrived at his usual quarters, it was already late in the night. He knocked at all the doors, but no one answered, and he was walking backwards and forwards in the piazza when suddenly a door flew open and an old man came out. He invited the traveler to enter, an invitation to which Shishan gladly responded, and tying up his mule, he went in. The place was totally unfurnished, and the old man began by saying that it was only out of compassion that he had asked him in, as his house was not an inn. "There are only 3 or 4 of us," added he, "and my wife and daughter are fast asleep. We have some of yesterday's food, which I will get ready for you. You must not object to its being cold." He then went within, and shortly afterwards returned with a low couch, which he placed on the ground, begging his guest to be seated, at the same time hurrying back for a low table, and soon for a number of other things, until at last Shishan was quite uncomfortable, and entreated his host to rest himself a while. By and by, a young lady came out, bringing some wine, upon which the old man said, "Oh, our Etienne has got up." She was about 16 or 17, a slender and pretty-looking girl, and as Shishan had an unmarried brother, he began to think directly that she would do for him. So he inquired of the old man his name and address, to which the latter replied that his name was Ku, and that his children had all died save this one daughter. I didn't like to wake her just now, but I suppose my wife told her to get up. Shishan then asked the name of his son-in-law, and was informed that the young lady was not yet engaged, at which he was secretly very much pleased. A tray of food was now brought in, evidently the remains from the day before, and when he had finished eating, Shishan began respectfully to address the old man as follows: "I am only a poor wayfarer, but I shall never forget the kindness with which you have treated me. Let me presume upon it and submit to your consideration a plan I have in my head. My younger brother, Songlin, is 17 years old. He is a student and by no means unsteady or dull. May I hope that you will unite our families together and not think it presumption on my part? I, too, am but a temporary sojourner," replied the old man, rejoicing. "And if you will only let me have a part of your house, I shall be very glad to come and live with you." Shishan consented to this, and got up and thanked him for the promise of his daughter, upon which the old man set to work to make him comfortable for the night, and then went away. At cockcrow, he was outside, calling his guest to come and have a wash. And when Shishan had packed up ready to go, he offered to pay for his night's entertainment. This, however, the old man refused, saying, "I could hardly charge a stranger anything for a single meal. How much less could I take money from my intended son-in-law?" They then separated, and in about a month Shishan returned. But when he was a short distance from the village, he met an old woman with a young lady, both dressed in deep mourning. As they approached, he began to suspect it was Etienne, and the young lady, after turning round to look at him, pulled the old woman's sleeve and whispered something in her ear, which Shishan himself did not hear. The old woman stopped immediately and asked if she was addressing Mr. Shi, and when informed that she was, she said mournfully, "Alas, my husband has been killed by the falling of a wall. We are going to bury him today. There is no one at home. But please wait here, and we will be back by and by." They then disappeared among the trees. In returning after a short absence, they walked along together in the dusk of the evening. The old woman complained bitterly of their lonely and helpless state, and Shishan himself was moved to compassion by the sight of her tears. She told him that the people of the neighborhood were a bad lot, and that if he thought of marrying a poor widow's daughter, he had better lose no time in doing so. Shishan said he was willing, and when they reached the house, the old woman, after lighting the lamp and setting food before him, proceeded to speak as follows. Knowing, sir, that you would shortly arrive, we sold all our grain except about 20 pickles. We cannot take this with us so far. But a mile or so to the north of the village, at the first house you come to, there lives a man named Tan Ershwan, who often buys grain from me. Don't think it too much trouble to oblige me by taking a sack with you on your mule and proceeding thither at once. Tell Mr. Tan that the old lady of the southern village has several pickles of grain which she wishes to sell in order to get money for a journey, and beg him to send some animals to carry it. The old woman then gave him a sack of grain, and Shishan, whipping up his mule, was soon at the place. And knocking at the door, a great fat fellow came out, to whom he told his errand. Emptying the sack he had brought, he went back himself first, and before long a couple of men arrived leading 5 mules. The old woman took them into the granary, which was a cellar below ground, and Shishan, going down himself, handed up the bags to the mother and daughter, who passed them on from one to the other. In a little while, the men had got a load, with which they went off, returning altogether 4 times before all the grain was exhausted. They then paid the old woman, who kept 1 man and 2 mules, and packing up her things, set off towards the east. After traveling some 7 miles, they began to break, and by they reached a market town, where the old woman hired animals and sent back Tan's servant. When they arrived at Shishan's home, he related the whole story to his parents, who were very pleased at what had happened and provided separate apartments for the old lady, at the same time engaging a fortune teller to fix on a lucky day for Echian's marriage with their son Songlin. The old woman prepared a handsome trousseau, and as for Echian herself, she spoke but little, seldom losing her temper, and if anyone addressed her, she would only reply with a smile. She employed all her time in spinning, and thus became a general favorite with all alike. Tell your brother, said she to Songlin, that when he happens to pass our old residence, he will do well not to make any mention of my mother and myself. In 3 or 4 years' time, the Shi family had made plenty of money, and Songlin had taken his bachelor's degree, when one day Shishan happened to pass a night with the people who lived next door to the house where he had met Echian. After telling them the story of his having had nowhere to sleep, and taking refuge with the old man and woman, his host said to him, "You must make a mistake, sir. The house you allude to belongs to my uncle, but was abandoned 3 years ago in consequence of its being haunted. It has now been uninhabited for a long time. What old man and woman can have entertained you there?" Shishan was very much astonished at this, but did not put much faith in what he heard. Meanwhile, his host continued, "For 10 years no one dared enter the house. However, one day the back wall fell down, and my uncle, going to look at it, found, half buried underneath the ruins, a large rat almost as big as a cat. It was still moving, and my uncle went off to call for assistance, but when he got back, the rat had disappeared. Everyone suspected some supernatural agency to be at work, though on returning to the spot 10 days afterwards, nothing was to be either heard or seen. And about a year subsequently, the place was inhabited once more." Shishan was more than ever amazed at what he now heard, and on reaching home told the family what had occurred, for he feared that his brother's wife was not a human being, and became rather anxious about him. Songlin himself continued to be much attached to Echian, but by and by the other members of the family let see and perceived that they had suspicions about her. So one night she complained to Songlin, saying, "I have been a good wife to you for some years. Now I have become an object of contempt. I pray you give me my divorce, and seek for yourself some worthier mate." She then burst into a flood of tears, whereupon Songlin said, "You should know my feelings by this time. Ever since you entered the house, the family has prospered, and that prosperity is entirely due to you. Who can say it is not so?" "I know full well," replied Qian, "what you feel. Still, there are the others, and I do not wish to share the fate of an autumn fan." At length, Songlin succeeded in pacifying her, but Shan could not dismiss the subject from his thoughts, and gave out that he was going to get a first-rate mouser with a view to testing Qian. She did not seem very frightened at this, though evidently ill at ease. And one night she told Songlin that her mother was not very well, and that he needn't come to bid her good night as usual. In the morning, mother and daughter had disappeared, at which Songlin was greatly alarmed and sent out to look for them in every direction. No traces of the fugitives could be discovered, and Songlin was overwhelmed with grief, unable either to eat or to sleep. His father and brother thought it was a lucky thing for him, and advised him to console himself with another wife. This, however, he refused to do, until, about a year afterwards, nothing more having been heard of Qian, he could not resist their importunities any longer, and bought himself a concubine. But he never ceased to think of Qian. And some years later, when the prosperity of the family was on the wane, they all began to regret her loss. Now Songlin had a stepbrother named Lan, who, when traveling to Jiaoshu on business, passed a night at the house of a relative named Lu. He noticed that during the night sounds of weeping and lamentation proceeded from their next-door neighbors, but he did not inquire the reason of it. However, on his way back he heard the same sounds, and then asked what was the cause of such demonstrations. Mr. Lu told him that a few years ago an old widow and her daughter had come there to live, and that the mother had died about a month previously, leaving her child quite alone in the world. Lan inquired what her name was, and Mr. Lu said it was Ku. "But," added he, "the door is closely barred, and as they never had any communication with the village, I know nothing of their antecedents." "It's my sister-in-law," cried Lan in amazement, and at once proceeded to knock at the door of the house. Someone came to the front door and said, in a voice that betokened recent weeping, "Who's there?" "There are no men in this house." Lan looked through a crack and saw that the young lady really was his sister-in-law. So he called out, "Sister, open the door. I am your stepbrother Asui." Qian immediately opened the door and asked him in, and recounted to him the whole story of her troubles. "Your husband," said Lan, "is always thinking of you. For a trifling difference, you need hardly have run away so far from him." He then proposed to hire a vehicle and take her home. But Qian replied, "I came hither with my mother to hide, because I was held in contempt, and should make myself ridiculous by now returning thus. If I am to go back, my elder brother Shan must no longer live with us. Otherwise, I will assuredly poison myself." Lan then went home and told Songlin, who set off and traveled all night until he reached the place where Qian was. Husband and wife were overjoyed to meet again, and the following day Songlin notified the landlord of the house where Qian had been living. Now this landlord had long desired to secure Qian as a concubine for himself, and after making no claim for rent for several years, he began to hint as much to her mother. The old lady, however, refused flatly, but shortly afterwards she died, and then the landlord thought that he might be able to succeed. At this juncture Songlin arrived, and the landlord sought to hamper him by putting in his claim for rent. And as Songlin was anything but well off at the moment, it really did annoy him very much. Qian here came to the rescue, showing Songlin a large quantity of grain she had in the house, and bidding him use it to settle accounts with the landlord. The The latter declared he could not accept grain, but must be paid in silver. Whereupon Ajian sighed and said it was all her unfortunate self that had brought this upon them, at the same time telling Sanlang of the landlord's former proposition. Sanlang was very angry and was about to take out a summons against him when Mr. Liu interposed, and by selling the grain in the neighborhood, managed to collect sufficient money to pay off the rent. Sanlang and his wife then returned home, and the former, having explained the circumstances to his parents, separated his household from that of his brother. Ajian now proceeded to build, with her own money, a granary, which was a matter of some astonishment to the family, there not being 100 weight of grain in the place. But in about a year, the granary was full, and before very long Songlin was a rich man, Shishan remaining as poor as before. Accordingly, Ajian persuaded her husband's parents to come and live with them, and made frequent presents of money to the elder brother, so that her husband said, "Well, at any rate, you bear no malice." "Your brother's behavior," replied she, "was from his regard for you. Had it not been for him, you and I would never have met." After this, there were no more supernatural manifestations.
Thanks for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more excellent content.